You ever notice how certain people move? Quiet voice, gentle smile, eyes that look harmless. They carry themselves like they could never hurt anyone. And that's exactly why they're effective. Because the most powerful manipulation rarely shows up loud. It shows up soft. It shows up as, I'm not like that. It shows up as, I'm just confused. It shows up as, I'm sensitive. It shows up as innocence. And if you've ever been blindsided by someone who seemed pure, sweet, low drama, almost childlike, you already know the lesson. Soft presentation is not the same thing as safe behavior. Some people aren't innocent. They're careful. They don't storm into your life. They drift in quietly. They stay understated. They make sure you never see them coming. Because when you look harmless, people stop watching your hands. That softness you notice first, the shy smile, the gentle tone, the way they listen like every word matters, that can be real. But in the wrong hands, it's camouflage. Not because softness is bad, because camouflage is strategic, and harmless is the easiest cover story a person can wear. Here's the core principle you need to lock in. Manipulators don't need to look dangerous. They just need you to believe they aren't capable of danger. That belief is the door, and most people walk through it willingly. So today, we're going to break down the psychology of the innocent persona, how it works, why it works, the patterns that reveal it, and how to protect yourself without becoming paranoid or bitter. This is not about hating anyone. It's about pattern recognition. Because the men who get played aren't always stupid. They're often decent. They're often protective. They're often wired to give the benefit of the doubt. And that instinct, when weaponized against you, becomes a liability. Let's start with the first deception, and it's the one most men never see. The innocence persona often comes with a preloaded script. You'll hear phrases like, I hate drama, I don't do games, I'm not like other people, I've been misunderstood, I'm just a nice person. And if you're not careful, you'll hear those statements as reassurance. But you should hear them as marketing. Because truly grounded, healthy people don't need to advertise how safe they are. They demonstrate it. They don't keep telling you they're loyal. They behave in a way that doesn't require you to wonder. They don't keep telling you they hate drama. They handle conflict directly, calmly, and consistently. The people who repeatedly announce innocence are often doing something else. They're building an identity you'll be afraid to challenge later. Because if you confront them, they can say, how could you think that of me? They turn your concern into an accusation. They turn your observation into an insult. And suddenly, you're not talking about their behavior. You're talking about your lack of trust. That's the trap. And it works because a lot of men don't want to be the guy who hurts someone sweet. They don't want to be unfair. They don't want to be harsh. So they soften. They retreat. They second guess themselves. And the manipulator learns something important. You can be steered. Now here's where the real problem starts. The innocence persona rarely uses direct lies. Direct lies are risky. They can be caught. They can be proven. So instead, the person uses something more effective. Omission. They give you 70% truth, and your mind fills in the missing 30%. That missing 30% is where the leverage lives. You don't get manipulated mainly by lies. You get manipulated by what you never get told. They'll say, I dated casually. But they won't define what casual means. They'll say, my last relationship was complicated. But they won't explain what part they played in the complication. They'll say, I value loyalty. But you'll notice they never talk about a time they had to be loyal when it cost them something. They offer fragments. You assemble a story. And the story you assemble is usually kinder than the truth, because most decent men project decency. That's your weakness. You assume the other person thinks like you, so you fill in the blanks with your own character. And the manipulator benefits from your imagination. Here's what you need to understand: a fully known person has less leverage. A partially known person can become whatever you want them to be. And if you're lonely, stressed, or craving connection, you will build that fantasy fast. Not because you're stupid, because your brain is trying to create certainty. And uncertainty feels unsafe. So you create a narrative. You create a good person. You create innocence. And now you're attached to a version of them that may not exist. That's why these situations hurt so much. You weren't just dating them, you were dating your own projection. Now let's talk about the next mechanism, the one that flips a man from leader to caretaker in seconds: weaponized vulnerability. This is where the softness becomes a tool. They know exactly when to shake their voice, exactly when to tear up, exactly when to look overwhelmed. And on the surface, it looks like emotional honesty. But pay attention to timing. A healthy person can cry and still take accountability. A manipulative person uses tears to avoid it. Watch the sequence. They don't break down when they hurt you. They break down when you confront them. They don't cry when they make a mistake. They cry when you notice it. They don't get emotional to repair damage. They get emotional to stop the conversation. That's not vulnerability. That's an escape hatch. And it works because most men have a hardwired response to distress. When someone looks fragile, your instinct is to protect, not investigate. You move from what happened to "are you okay?" in 2 seconds, and now the spotlight shifts. Now your standards look like cruelty. Now your boundary looks like aggression. Now their behavior becomes secondary. Their feelings take over the room. This is one of the biggest traps for good men, because good men don't want to intimidate, so they back off. They lower the pressure. They drop the issue. They apologize for their tone instead of holding the line on the facts. And the manipulator learns another lesson. If I perform distress, he'll stop demanding clarity. So here's the rule: never let emotion replace accountability. You can be compassionate and still stay anchored. You can speak calmly and still insist on reality. Because if you become the protector every time you should be the judge, you'll get controlled. Now we move into the third mechanism, and this one is the most addictive: intermittent reinforcement. This is the slow fade, not leaving, not committing, not being consistent, just becoming harder to reach. The replies slow down, the warmth becomes unpredictable. The energy shifts in tiny increments, so small you question yourself. And that's the point, because when someone withdraws cleanly, you get clarity. When someone withdraws in fragments, you get confusion. And confusion keeps you invested. It keeps you working. It keeps you chasing. This is basic behavioral psychology. Casinos run on it. Slot machines work because rewards are unpredictable. Your brain gets hooked on uncertainty. You don't chase what's stable. You chase what might return. So when someone gives you warmth sometimes, distance other times, attention one day, and silence the next, your mind starts trying to solve the puzzle. What did I do? What changed? How do I get back to the good version? And now your attention becomes their currency, because you're managing their absence. You're not building a relationship. You're maintaining access. And here's the part that should scare you. You can become addicted to someone who isn't even that good to you, not because they're special, because the pattern is addictive. A clean exit hurts once. A slow fade hurts every day. So the standard is simple: Consistency is not a bonus. Consistency is the baseline. If someone is inconsistent early, they're not busy. They're conditioning you. Now let's hit another layer that confuses men. Ambiguity as control. Some people refuse to define anything. They talk in hints. They speak in implications. They avoid direct commitments. And if you question it, they frame it as maturity. I don't like labels. I like to go with the flow. Why do we need to define it? Sounds harmless until you realize what ambiguity does. Ambiguity gives them the benefits of closeness without the responsibilities of closeness. They can keep you emotionally invested while staying technically unaccountable. They can take your time, your attention, your consistency, your protection. But if you ask for clarity, they can say, I never said we were exclusive. I never promised anything. You assumed. That's plausible deniability, and it's engineered. Here's the truth. The person who refuses to define the relationship controls the relationship. Because you're the one bending. You're the one guessing. You're the one adapting. You're the one trying to earn certainty while they keep options open. So here's the masculine rule. If you want peace, you demand clarity early. Not aggressively, not emotionally, just directly. What are we doing here? What are you looking for? What does commitment mean to you? And you watch what happens. Healthy people answer cleanly. Manipulative people get slippery. They turn it into a philosophical conversation. They accuse you of pressure. They make you feel unreasonable for wanting basic definitions. And that reaction is your answer. Now let's talk about the part that hits men hardest, script flipping. You confront a real issue, a boundary violation, a lie by omission, a disrespectful moment, and suddenly you become the problem. And not because you're wrong, because your reaction becomes the new topic. You're insecure. You're controlling. You're overreacting. I can't believe you think that of me. Notice how none of those statements address the behavior. They attack your right to question it. And the goal is simple. Transfer guilt from them to you. Because if you feel guilty, you stop investigating. A man will abandon his own standards fast when he believes he's being unfair. That's why the innocence persona is so effective. It makes you afraid to be the bad guy, so you retreat into politeness, and politeness becomes your prison. Now I want to give you the turning point moment, the moment this whole game falls apart. There is one thing the innocence persona can't survive. A man who stays calm and insists on reality. Not angry, not emotional, not chasing, not over-explaining, just clear. Because the persona depends on your participation. It depends on you filling blanks. It depends on you apologizing for noticing. It depends on you rescuing them from accountability. The moment you stop doing those things, the mask starts cracking. And it doesn't crack because you're cruel. It cracks because the performance requires your cooperation. Here's what you'll often see when you stop reacting. Irritation instead of softness. Defensiveness instead of vulnerability. Coldness instead of sweetness. Or sudden love bombing to pull you back in. And this is where you learn the final truth. People reveal themselves fastest when they lose control of the narrative. Not when they're comfortable. Not when they're winning. When they're cornered by clarity. So what should you do with all of this? Because the point is not to become suspicious of every quiet person. The point is to stop confusing presentation with character. Softness can be real. Innocence can be real. Vulnerability can be real, but you judge them by patterns, not vibes. Here's your framework. Look for these markers: consistency, accountability, specificity, transparency, stability under tension. A healthy person can be questioned without collapsing into performance. A healthy person can admit fault without turning you into the villain. A healthy person can define the relationship without hiding behind ambiguity. A healthy person can handle conflict without weaponizing emotion. And if those markers are missing, you don't need revenge. You don't need anger. You don't need a speech. You need distance. Because the most powerful move a man can make is not arguing with a manipulator, it's refusing to keep paying attention. Let me say that again. You don't beat manipulation by explaining. You beat it by exiting the pattern. If someone trains you to chase, you stop chasing. If someone trains you to doubt yourself, you write things down and trust facts. If someone trains you to accept inconsistency, you raise your standard and enforce it. And if someone uses innocence as a shield, you don't attack their character. You simply demand clarity and accountability. If they can't meet it, you leave. Because peace is a standard, not a reward. Now let's close this with a clean takeaway. The innocent persona isn't dangerous because it's soft. It's dangerous because it invites you to stop paying attention. It makes you assume. It makes you excuse. It makes you fill blanks. It makes you surrender your instincts to be nice. And the moment you learn this, your entire dating life changes. You stop being led by charm. You stop being disarmed by tears. You stop being conditioned by inconsistency. You become a man who can appreciate softness without being controlled by it. Not bitter, not paranoid, just awake. And when you're awake, you stop chasing what costs you your sanity. You choose women, and people in general, who make life simpler, clearer, calmer. Because real love doesn't require confusion. It doesn't require guessing. It doesn't require you to abandon yourself. If you've lived through a situation like this, you already know how it ends when you keep ignoring your gut. So here's the question that matters. Are you being respected? Are you being met with consistency? Are you getting clarity? Are they accountable? If not, the innocence doesn't matter. The sweetness doesn't matter. The vibe doesn't matter. Patterns do. And a man who learns to read patterns stops getting played